The polished chrome elevator doors hissed open, revealing a panoramic view of the bustling city below, a concrete jungle sprawling endlessly under a pale morning sky. Inside, a line of impeccably dressed young professionals stood, each exuding an aura of meticulous preparation and quiet ambition. Their suits were tailored, their shoes gleamed, and their resumes, tucked neatly into expensive leather folders, boasted degrees from Ivy League institutions and internships at global corporations. This was the final round of interviews for a coveted junior executive position at a tech giant, known not only for its innovation, but also for its notoriously rigorous hiring process. The air hummed with nervous anticipation, a silent symphony of whispered anxieties and confident self-introductions. In the spacious, minimalist waiting area, the camera subtly shifted, settling on the figure of Mr. Arthur Thompson, the enigmatic CEO. He sat perched on the edge of a sleek, ergonomic chair, his posture betraying a restless energy that belied his calm demeanor. Thompson, a self-made billionaire, was renowned not just for his business acumen but for his profoundly unconventional methods, a trait that had both propelled his company to astronomical heights and raised more than a few eyebrows in the corporate world. His gaze swept over the applicants, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, hinting at a secret he alone possessed. Among this sea of pristine perfection, a stark contrast was about to emerge. Her name was Sarah. A bright, resourceful young woman, Sarah hailed from a decidedly lower-income background in a vibrant, yet often unforgiving, American city. She was a recent graduate, her academic record a testament to sheer grit and unwavering determination. Every late-night study session, every skipped social event, had been fueled by a singular, burning desire to provide for her struggling family. Her mother's mounting medical bills and her younger siblings' needs weighed heavily on her shoulders, transforming ambition into an urgent, vital mission. Her resume, an impressive document packed with academic distinctions and impactful community work, stood shoulder to shoulder with those of her more privileged peers. Yet, her appearance, particularly her footwear, told a different story. Her shoes, once sturdy black flats, were now held together by several strips of diligently applied heavy-duty silver duct tape, a stark, almost defiant symbol of her daily reality. The elevator doors opened again with a soft chime, and a visibly flustered Sarah stepped out. She was a few minutes late, the city's notoriously unpredictable public transport system having conspired against her. Her usually neat, though inexpensive blouse was slightly rumpled, and a stray strand of dark hair had escaped her carefully pinned bun. But it was her shoes that truly drew the eye. The bright silver tape stood out against the worn black leather, a siren call to the subtle stares and barely concealed whispers that rippled through the waiting room. Heads turned, eyebrows arched, and a few candidates exchanged knowing glances, their judgment palpable in the sudden silence. Sarah felt the heat rise to her cheeks, acutely aware of the scrutiny, but pushed back the sting of embarrassment with a familiar resilience. She met the glances with a polite, if nervous, smile, and quickly found an empty seat, trying to compose herself. Mr. Thompson, seemingly engrossed in a document on his tablet, subtly lifted his head. His eyes, keen and piercing, fell upon Sarah, lingering for a moment on her duct-taped shoes, then moving to her face, which, despite the flush of agitation, held a spark of defiant courage. A flicker of something unreadable, perhaps curiosity, perhaps recognition, passed through his gaze. He set his tablet down with a decisive click, the sound echoing slightly in the hushed room. "Good morning, everyone." Mr. Thompson's voice was smooth, resonant, and commanded immediate attention. Thank you for making it to this final stage. Your qualifications are, without a doubt, exemplary." He paused, letting his words sink in. "However, this year our interview process will be different." A ripple of murmurs spread through the candidates. Different how? Their perfectly rehearsed answers and meticulously crafted self-presentations suddenly felt precarious. "I will be making my first cut based purely on initial impressions," Thompson continued, his voice calm but firm. "Before a single question is asked, before a single resume is fully reviewed, I will select the individual I believe possesses the true spirit of this company." A collective gasp, quickly stifled, filled the room. Tension, thick and suffocating, descended. Confusion mingled with outrage on many faces. This was unheard of, unfair, arbitrary. But such was Mr. Thompson's reputation. His unconventionality was legend. The junior executive position was more than just a job. It was a golden ticket. It offered a substantial six-figure salary, unparalleled opportunities for career growth, and a direct path to the upper echelons of the tech world. For Sarah, it was literally her only chance. It was the lifeline that could pull her family out of the crushing grip of poverty, the one opportunity to turn years of struggle into a future of stability. The stakes were impossibly high, and now, it seemed, her fate would be decided by a glance, a gut feeling, a whim. The room felt like a pressure cooker, every breath held, every muscle tensed. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more inspiring tales. Mr. Thompson, a figure of quiet authority, began his deliberate patrol of the waiting candidates. His footsteps, barely audible on the plush carpet, echoed the tension in the room. Each candidate stood rigid, a perfect tableau of ambition and polished professionalism. He moved down the line, his gaze sharp and dissecting, lingering just long enough to absorb every detail. He observed the pristine suits, tailored to perfection, probably costing more than Sarah's entire wardrobe. He noted the glint of expensive watches peeking from cuffs, the subtle sparkle of designer accessories carefully chosen to exude quiet wealth. Confident, almost rehearsed smiles bloomed and vanished as his eyes passed, a practiced deference that spoke of privilege and expectation. Each person was a meticulously crafted image, a testament to the conventional path to success, a path paved with impeccable presentations. He seemed to absorb the collective aura of readiness, the unspoken assertion of worth that emanated from their carefully groomed appearances. His journey brought him to Sarah, who stood a little apart, a quiet eddy in the swirling currents of self-assuredness. When his gaze finally settled on her, she felt its weight, a sudden intensification that made her swallow hard. His eyes, keen and unblinking, immediately dropped to her feet. The duct-taped shoes, a stark declaration of necessity amidst the gleaming leathers and polished heels, seemed to hum under his scrutiny. He didn't recoil, didn't flinch, but simply observed. From her feet, his eyes traveled slowly upwards, taking in the small, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands, clasping each other tightly in front of her. They were clean, well-maintained hands, but the slight tremble betrayed the immense pressure she felt. He noticed the determined set of her jaw, the way her shoulders were held back despite the visible strain, a defiant posture that spoke volumes about her fighting spirit. His gaze softened almost imperceptibly as it reached her otherwise clean, though undeniably dated blouse. A tiny faint stain, barely visible, near the collar, likely a casualty of a rushed morning or a moment of distraction, stood out against the simple fabric. It was a detail only someone truly looking truly observing beyond the veneer, would catch. It wasn't a mark of carelessness, but rather a reminder of a life lived at full speed, juggling countless responsibilities. He saw not just the physical details, but the story they told, a narrative distinct from the polished perfection of the others. Without uttering a single word, Mr. Thompson completed his circuit, walking back to the front of the room. The air crackled with anticipation, every candidate holding their breath, their carefully constructed smiles now frozen in place. He paused, his back to them for a brief, agonizing moment, then turned. His hand rose, and with a gesture that felt both sudden and entirely deliberate, he pointed. Not at the polished executive in the front row, nor the Ivy League graduate with the dazzling resume. His finger, steady and unwavering, pointed directly at Sarah. "You," he announced, his voice carrying surprising clarity in the hushed room. "You're in. The rest of you, thank you for your time." The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum created by the sheer impossibility of his words. Then, like a dam breaking, a wave of shock and outrage surged through the room. Murmurs erupted, swiftly escalating into indignant protests. "What? That's absurd. On what basis? This is an insult." Demands for an explanation filled the air, questioning his judgment, his fairness, his very sanity. The meticulously composed facades of the other candidates shattered, revealing raw indignation and disbelief. Sarah, standing frozen, felt a jolt of pure adrenaline mixed with utter disbelief. Her mind struggled to process his words. Had she heard correctly? Was this some elaborate, cruel trick? Her vision blurred momentarily, the faces of the other candidates twisting into masks of fury and confusion. Mr. Thompson remained unperturbed, his expression as calm as a placid lake. He raised a hand, silencing the burgeoning rebellion with quiet authority. "I saw what I needed to see," he stated simply, his voice cutting through the lingering anger. He didn't offer a lengthy justification, no detailed rubric or explanation. Instead, he simply added, "I hire people, not resumes. Character is not found in a cover letter or the brand of your shoes." It was a cryptic statement, hinting at a deeper understanding of human nature, a discernment that went beyond superficial presentations and conventional metrics. He implied that true potential, genuine worth, could be glimpsed in the most unexpected places. He believed in instincts honed over years, in reading the subtle cues that others often overlooked in their pursuit of quantifiable perfection. While a wave of immense, dizzying relief washed over Sarah, it was quickly followed by an overwhelming sense of bewilderment and trepidation. She felt like an imposter, caught in a dream that threatened to dissolve at any moment. Her mind raced, desperately searching for a hidden clause, a cruel twist. Was this a test? A bizarre initiation into a world she scarcely understood? She looked around at the angry, confused faces of the rejected candidates, then back at Mr. Thompson, whose eyes now held a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher. A spark of satisfaction, perhaps, or a knowing challenge. The enormity of what had just happened, of the life-altering opportunity that had just been handed to her, settled in her chest, heavy and exhilarating all at once. She was in. But the question of why hung thick in the air, making her both grateful and profoundly uneasy. She wondered if she truly belonged, if she could possibly live up to whatever unconventional expectation this powerful man had placed upon her, solely based on a brief, silent observation. It was a victory, undeniably, but one tinged with a confusing sense of undeserved fortune and a foreboding hint of the immense challenges that lay ahead. The heavy oak door swung shut with a muted thud, sealing off the cacophony of outraged whispers from the hallway. Sarah found herself standing alone in a vast, opulent office, the scent of polished wood and old money filling her nostrils. Her heart still hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of disbelief and a nascent, terrifying hope. A young assistant, impeccably dressed and with a perpetually serene expression, gestured towards a plush leather armchair positioned before an enormous mahogany desk. "Please, have a seat, Miss Davies," she murmured, her voice as smooth as silk, before silently gliding out of the room. Sarah sank into the chair, the soft leather a stark contrast to the worn fabric of her own clothes. She glanced down at her shoes, the gray duct tape a stark, almost defiant statement against the pristine Persian rug. Was this real? Was this some elaborate test beginning, or would she wake up from a dream? A moment later, Mr. Thompson entered, no longer the enigmatic figure on a power trip, but a man of quiet authority. He moved with an effortless grace that belied his age, his gaze sharp yet devoid of the earlier intensity. He didn't sit immediately, instead walking to a small bar cart in the corner, pouring a glass of water. "You look a little shaken, Miss Davies," he said, his voice calm, offering her the glass. "It's understandable. My methods aren't for everyone." Sarah took the glass, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed his. "Thank you, sir," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. She took a long, steadying sip, the cool water a welcome relief. He sat opposite her, leaning back comfortably. "My decision today was not random, Sarah. It might seem impulsive to some, perhaps even unfair, but I assure you, it was based on a lifetime of observation, of learning to read people, not just their resumes." As he spoke, Sarah's mind drifted, the unfamiliar luxury of the room fading as memories of her own life surged forward. It wasn't just the duct-taped shoes that told her story. It was every decision, every sacrifice. She remembered the day her mother, frail and weary from endless shifts at the diner, had coughed uncontrollably, her face pale. The doctor's visit had confirmed their fears. A chronic lung condition requiring expensive medication and regular care. Sarah, then just a teenager, knew instantly that her dreams of a distant college, of a life untethered by financial worries, would have to wait. There was her younger brother, Mark, brilliant and artistic, whose sketchbooks were his escape from their cramped apartment, and her little sister Mia, whose bright, innocent eyes demanded a better future than their current reality offered. Every penny Sarah earned from her part-time jobs, every scholarship she chased, every extra hour she put into her studies, was for them. The shoes, now a focal point of her current predicament, were a testament to this unwavering commitment. They were a graduation gift, a symbol of hope from her mother, bought with hard-saved money. When the soles had started to split, admitting the damp city grit, she hadn't considered discarding them. New shoes were a luxury they couldn't afford, not when Mia needed new glasses or when the electricity bill was due. So, with careful precision, she had reinforced them with layers of industrial-strength duct tape. She had polished them diligently, ensuring they were impeccably clean for this interview, a desperate attempt to show respect despite the physical evidence of her struggles. They were a badge of her resourcefulness, her relentless refusal to be defeated by circumstances, a silent declaration that she would make do with what she had and make it work. Mr. Thompson, seemingly sensing her introspection, continued. "Many years ago, I stood in a similar position, Sarah. Not in front of a panel of executives, perhaps, but certainly at a crossroads, with nothing but a burning ambition and a pair of worn-out boots." He paused, a flicker of a faraway memory in his eyes. I learned early on that character isn't built in comfort. It's forged in adversity. Resourcefulness, grit, resilience. These are qualities that no university degree can truly teach, and no expensive suit can truly hide. The world throws problems at us, Sarah, and what I look for in my team are people who don't just solve them, but who find innovative ways to overcome obstacles when the conventional paths are blocked. He leaned forward slightly, his tone shifting, becoming more direct. We have a particular challenge facing us right now, a new market entry strategy that's hit a snag. The team has been trying to unravel it for weeks. Instead of the usual interview questions, tell me, what are your immediate thoughts on how we might approach integrating a disruptive new technology into an established, traditional consumer base? Don't worry about corporate jargon. Just tell me what comes to your mind. He settled back, watching her intently, a silent challenge in his gaze. The sudden, direct question hung heavy in the air, a complex tapestry of business jargon and strategic implications that threatened to overwhelm Sarah. Her mind reeled, a whirlwind of unfamiliar terms and daunting scenarios. She felt her throat tighten, the familiar tendrils of self-doubt beginning to coil around her. Integrate disruptive technology, traditional consumer base. These were concepts she'd only skimmed in textbooks, far removed from the immediate, tangible problems of leaky shoes and overdue bills. She was a recent graduate, her experience limited to academic theory and the practical, often messy, realities of survival. For a fleeting moment, a wave of panic washed over her, the fear of inadequacy threatening to silence her completely. She felt an imposter, a fraud standing in a gleaming executive office, being asked to solve a problem that stumped seasoned professionals. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her tightly clasped hands, the scars on her knuckles from various odd jobs, a stark contrast to the polished mahogany desk. But then, a different kind of thought, a persistent, familiar voice, cut through the noise. It was the voice of necessity, of countless moments where she'd had to improvise, to find a way, to make something out of very little. She thought of her mother, meticulously budgeting every dollar, stretching every meal. She thought of Mark, building intricate models from discarded scraps, seeing potential where others saw trash. She thought of Mia, confidently navigating their chaotic neighborhood, always finding the safest route. Problem-solving wasn't just a corporate skill. It was a way of life, honed in the crucible of her existence. Her eyes lifted, meeting Mr. Thompson's unwavering gaze, and a spark ignited within her. She took a deep breath, pushing past the initial intimidation. "Well," she began, her voice a little shaky at first, but gaining strength with each word, "I suppose the first thing you have to understand is who your traditional consumer is, really. Not just demographics, but what truly matters to them. If they're traditional, they might value familiarity, trust, and perhaps simplicity. Disruptive technology, by its nature, often feels unfamiliar, untrustworthy, and complex." She leaned forward slightly, her mind now racing, connecting disparate thoughts. "So, you can't just throw it at them and expect them to embrace it. It's like when my community got those new self-checkout machines at the grocery store. Everyone hated them at first. They wanted to talk to a person. They wanted the familiar routine. The store tried to force it, and people just got frustrated." She paused, considering. What eventually worked was when they started having a friendly staff member right there, guiding people, showing them it wasn't so scary, making it personal. And they simplified the interface, made it look less like a spaceship dashboard and more like an ATM. Her logic was simple, practical, born from observation rather than abstract theory. "So, my thought would be to bridge that gap. Don't just introduce the technology, introduce its benefits in a language your traditional consumer understands. Show them how it makes their life easier, not just different. Maybe even start with a smaller, less intimidating aspect of the technology, a gateway drug, if you will, that builds trust. And crucially, involve them in the process. Make them feel heard. Perhaps pilot programs in smaller, more representative segments of that traditional base, gathering feedback and letting them feel like they're shaping it, not just having it imposed. Mr. Thompson watched her, a slow, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. His posture remained relaxed, but his eyes held an intense, assessing quality. He saw not just the ideas, but the thought process behind them. The ability to distill a complex corporate challenge into relatable human experiences, to connect abstract concepts to everyday frustrations and solutions. He saw the empathy, the understanding of the end user, often lost in high-level strategic discussions. Sarah hadn't given him a PowerPoint-ready presentation, but she had offered something far more valuable. A grounded, human-centered approach that was often the missing piece in technologically driven initiatives. Her solutions were practical, devoid of corporate buzzwords, and focused on the fundamental needs of people. Unbeknownst to Sarah, the entire exchange was being observed through a one-way mirror by several senior executives, their faces a mix of skepticism and outright disdain. Martha Jenkins, the head of global marketing, shifted uncomfortably. He's really going to bring in someone who thinks about grocery store self-checkouts? For a multi-million-dollar market entry strategy? She muttered to David Chen, the chief technology officer, her tone dripping with incredulity. David, usually stoic, raised an eyebrow. Her ideas are unsophisticated. Where's the data analysis? The competitive landscape breakdown? He questioned, his voice low. This entire interview is a farce. We have MBAs from top-tier universities waiting, Mr. Thompson. This is a junior executive role, not an entry-level customer service position, added Michael Vance, the head of HR, his arms crossed, clearly affronted by the unconventional process. Mr. Thompson, however, remained unfazed by their silent criticisms, and indeed, by their thinly veiled doubts, which he was well aware of. He simply turned his head slightly toward the mirror, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by the unseen observers. You often look for conventional perfection, gentlemen and ladies, he stated calmly, his eyes still holding a knowing glint. You look for the polished veneer, the practiced answers, the established playbook, and in doing so, you often overlook what truly matters. The capacity for original thought, the ability to connect with the user experience on a foundational level, the sheer grit to find a solution when none seems apparent. These are qualities that build empires, not just maintain them. He paused, his gaze hardening slightly as he looked directly into the mirror. I challenge you to give her a fair chance, to see beyond the duct-taped shoes and listen to the mind behind them. You might be surprised at what you've been missing. Meanwhile, Sarah, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding behind the glass, felt a surge of tentative confidence, quickly followed by a familiar wave of unease. She had spoken her mind, offered her perspective, and perhaps, just perhaps, it hadn't been entirely foolish. Yet, the grandeur of the office, the weight of the expectations, and the sheer audacity of her being there still gnawed at her. She was acutely aware of her worn clothing, the faint scuff marks on her taped shoes, the vast chasm between her life and this opulent environment. Was she truly capable of contributing to such an elite organization? Could her street smarts genuinely translate into corporate success? The imposter syndrome, a constant companion throughout her journey, whispered its insidious doubts, even as a small part of her dared to hope. Sarah's mind raced, a whirlwind of doubt and determination. The question itself was a behemoth, a multi-layered puzzle that felt designed to expose her inexperience. Disruptive technology, established consumer base. Her gaze flickered to the polished mahogany desk, then to the imposing city skyline visible through the panoramic window. This was a world far removed from her own, a world of complex market dynamics and strategic maneuvers. For a fleeting second, the familiar pang of imposter syndrome threatened to paralyze her. But then, Mr. Thompson's words echoed in her mind. Resourcefulness, grit, resilience, and the memory of Mia's excited chatter about a new animated show, Mark's meticulous drawings of futuristic gadgets, her mother's weary but hopeful smile. They ignited a spark. Her family had taught her about disruptive technology in its own way, adapting to constantly changing circumstances, finding innovative solutions when resources were scarce. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "The first thing that comes to mind isn't about the technology itself, but about trust. Traditional consumer bases are often built on established relationships and a sense of reliability. Introducing something disruptive can feel like a threat, not a benefit." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "My initial thought would be to identify the core values of that traditional consumer base. What do they hold dear? Is it quality, legacy, community, ease of use? Once you understand their inherent motivations, you can frame the disruptive technology not as an overhaul, but as an evolution that enhances those existing values rather than replacing them." Mr. Thompson leaned forward again, a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Sarah continued, gaining confidence. "For example, if it's a product for an older demographic, perhaps convenience and security are paramount. The disruptive technology would need to be presented as something that simplifies their lives, makes them safer, or connects them more effectively to their loved ones without requiring a steep learning curve. It's about building bridges, not burning them. You might even consider a phased introduction, perhaps partnering with trusted community figures or influencers within that traditional group to vouch for the new technology." She thought about her grandmother, hesitant with new devices until Sarah patiently guided her through their benefits. It's less about selling the gadget and more about selling the improved lifestyle or enhanced experience it offers, tailored specifically to their needs and fears, not just the general markets. And transparency is key. Addressing potential concerns proactively, almost like a town hall meeting, rather than waiting for resistance to build. Her explanation was fluid, unburdened by corporate jargon, yet remarkably insightful. Mr. Thompson listened, his expression unreadable, but the subtle shift in his posture, the slight glint in his eyes, suggested deep engagement. He had expected a technical answer, perhaps a regurgitation of business school theories. Instead, Sarah offered something far more profound, an empathetic, human-centered approach to market strategy. He recognized the innate understanding of customer psychology, born not from textbooks, but from navigating the complex tapestry of human needs and desires in her own life. Unbeknownst to Sarah, in the observation room behind the one-way mirror, a hushed conversation was unfolding. Dr. Lena Hansen, the company's head of R&D, a woman with a formidable intellect and an even more formidable skepticism of unconventional methods, frowned. "He's still going on about this girl. Frank, did you see those shoes?" And her answer, while quaint, lacked any real analytical depth. Where's the competitive landscape analysis? The ROI projections? Frank Miller, the COO, a man who valued efficiency above all else, sighed. Lena, you know how Thompson is. He has his eccentricities, but frankly, I think he's gone too far this time. We need a seasoned professional for this role. This isn't a charity. Mr. Thompson, in his office, remained oblivious to their disparaging remarks. He simply met Sarah's gaze directly. "Sarah," he said, his voice calm, "that was an interesting perspective. Very interesting. Now, I told you earlier that you were in, and indeed you are, but this isn't a formal job offer just yet." Sarah felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. "I'm offering you a 2-week trial period, working directly under me. Consider it a fast-track immersion into the heart of this company. You'll be tasked with complex assignments, attending high-level meetings, and you'll get to see firsthand the challenges we face." He leaned back, a challenging glint in his eyes. "It won't be easy. You'll be scrutinized. Some will doubt you, perhaps even resent you. You'll have to prove your capabilities not just to me, but to a very skeptical board." Sarah felt the weight of his words, the enormity of the opportunity, and the daunting prospect of the coming weeks. The trial period, the board, the skepticism. It was a baptism by fire, a gauntlet she had to run. A flicker of her old doubt resurfaced. Could she truly navigate this elite corporate world with her duct-taped shoes and her street-smart wisdom? Would her resilience be enough? "I understand, Mr. Thompson," she managed, her voice a little tremulous. "I accept. I'll give it everything I have." The 2 weeks that followed were an exhilarating, exhausting blur. Sarah was indeed thrown into the deep end. Her days were a relentless cycle of meetings where acronyms flew like confetti, dense reports filled with unfamiliar jargon, and presentations that moved at a dizzying pace. She was given an office, small but functional, and a seemingly endless task list. She found herself sitting in boardrooms, surrounded by sharp suits and sharper minds, acutely aware of the subtle glances, the hushed whispers that followed her. Some colleagues were overtly dismissive, their questions pointedly challenging her lack of conventional experience. Others, while not openly hostile, maintained a polite distance, their skepticism a palpable barrier. Her duct-taped shoes, though meticulously clean, remained a silent testament to her background, an almost defiant symbol. They were a constant reminder of where she came from, and for some, an uncomfortable anomaly. She quickly learned to adapt, soaking up information like a sponge. Every evening, long after her colleagues had left, she was in her office, researching industry trends, studying company history, dissecting financial reports. She learned to ask intelligent, probing questions, not out of ignorance, but out of a genuine desire to understand, to find the underlying mechanisms. There were moments, late at night, when exhaustion blurred the edges of her vision, when the sheer pressure threatened to crush her. One particularly grueling day, after a condescending remark from a senior manager questioned her grasp of market analytics, she almost broke. Sitting alone in her office, the city lights twinkling relentlessly outside, she felt the familiar knot of frustration, a burning desire to just give up, to retreat to the familiar comfort of her old life, however difficult it was. The gap between her world and theirs seemed too vast, the effort required too monumental. But then, a quiet thought, a memory of Mia's infectious giggle, of Mark's unwavering belief in her, solidified her resolve. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing it for them. Her duct-taped shoes were not a mark of shame. They were a badge of honor, a symbol of every battle she had fought and won. During this tumultuous period, Mr. Thompson remained a distant, almost enigmatic figure. He rarely offered explicit praise, nor did he directly intervene in her daily struggles. Yet, his presence was a constant, subtle force. Occasionally, he would stop by her desk, offering a cryptic piece of advice disguised as a casual observation. Sometimes the solution isn't in the data, Sarah, but in understanding the human element that generates the data. Or, don't let the noise obscure the signal. Clarity often comes from stepping back, not leaning in. These pronouncements, initially perplexing, invariably guided her towards finding her own answers, pushing her to think deeper, to trust her unique perspective. He wasn't giving her fish. He was teaching her how to fish in the most challenging waters she had ever encountered. A critical company project, one that had been deemed a flagship initiative for the coming fiscal year, was in serious jeopardy. It concerned the integration of a highly complex artificial intelligence framework into their legacy customer relationship management systems. The initial projections had been optimistic, promising a revolutionary leap in efficiency and customer personalization. However, the reality was far more convoluted. The development team, a group of highly skilled but traditionally minded engineers, found themselves constantly hitting roadblocks. Deadlines were slipping, budget overruns were becoming a daily concern, and the mood within the department was palpable with frustration. The project, once a beacon of innovation, was quickly morphing into a corporate headache, threatening to tarnish the company's reputation for forward-thinking solutions. Mr. Thompson had been monitoring the situation closely, his usual calm demeanor occasionally ruffled by the persistent negative reports. He knew this project was too important to fail, yet the current trajectory pointed directly towards an embarrassing public failure. Against the solemn advice of his board members and several senior executives who advocated for bringing in external consultants or reassigning the project to a more established internal team, Mr. Thompson made a decision that sent ripples of disbelief through the upper echelons of the company. He assigned Sarah to a pivotal role within this struggling project, not as a junior assistant, not as an observer, but with significant responsibility, positioning her as a fresh pair of eyes, a disruptive element in a system that had become stagnant. He announced his decision in a hushed meeting, the silence that followed punctuated only by the subtle murmurs of disapproval. Sarah, still navigating the complexities of her trial period, was both terrified and exhilarated by the unexpected trust placed in her. This was her chance, her make-or-break moment. Sarah approached the project with her characteristic blend of humility and fierce determination. She spent days immersed in the project documentation, poring over technical specifications, architectural diagrams, and endless lines of code, often staying late into the night. She observed team meetings, listening intently to the engineers explain their challenges, the subtle frustrations in their voices, the unspoken concessions they had made to conventional wisdom. It quickly became clear to her that the fundamental flaw wasn't in the technology itself, nor entirely in the team's capabilities. It was a foundational misunderstanding of the end-user experience, a disconnect between the intricate technical design and the simple, intuitive needs of the customer service representatives who would ultimately interact with the system. The seasoned engineers, brilliant in their technical prowess, had become so engrossed in the minutiae of the AI's algorithms that they had lost sight of the human element, assuming a level of technical fluency from the users that simply didn't exist. Their approach was like designing a rocket ship for someone who only needed to drive a car. She saw a pattern of over-engineering, a pursuit of theoretical perfection that ignored practical application. The existing strategy was trying to force a square peg into a round hole, attempting to adapt cutting-edge AI to a legacy system in a way that was overly complex and inefficient. Her mind, unburdened by years of corporate dogma and technical orthodoxy, quickly identified a simpler, more elegant solution. She proposed a radically different approach. Instead of trying to integrate the AI directly into the existing, cumbersome CRM, she suggested developing a lightweight, user-friendly middleware layer. This layer would act as an intelligent interpreter, simplifying the AI's output into actionable insights for the customer service team, while shielding them from the underlying complexity. It was a bridge, not an attempt to rebuild the river. Her ideas, presented tentatively at first, were met with strong resistance and even outright disdain from some senior team members. What does she know about enterprise-level architecture? One seasoned engineer scoffed during a technical review meeting. Another, a veteran project manager, openly questioned her credentials, muttering about youthful idealism and lack of practical experience. They viewed her as an inexperienced outsider, a temporary distraction, and her suggestions as naive, even arrogant. They had invested months, even years, into their current strategy, and this abrupt, unconventional proposal from a newcomer felt like a personal affront. There were subtle attempts to sideline her, to dismiss her contributions as interesting but impractical, to exclude her from key decisions. Sarah felt the familiar sting of being underestimated, the subtle condescension that tried to push her back into the shadows. The weight of their skepticism pressed down on her, tempting her to retreat, to simply conform. Mr. Thompson, however, had been observing everything. He attended meetings silently, his gaze shifting between Sarah and her detractors, absorbing the nuances of their interactions. He recognized the defensiveness, the ego, the fear of change that permeated the air. He saw the flicker of doubt in Sarah's eyes, but also the unwavering conviction behind them. He understood that true innovation often came from those unburdened by predefined limitations. In a pivotal strategy meeting, after Sarah's proposed solution was once again met with a wall of objections, Mr. Thompson finally intervened. He cut through the technical jargon and the corporate politeness, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "We have been struggling with this for weeks," he stated, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Sarah has presented a lucid, practical, and potentially game-changing alternative. I am empowering her to implement her proposed changes. Her instincts are precisely what this project needs. I expect full cooperation and support from every member of this team. We will pivot immediately." The room fell silent, the resistance momentarily quelled by the CEO's unwavering trust in his unconventional protégé. Sarah felt a surge of relief mixed with a terrifying sense of responsibility. The gauntlet had been thrown, and now it was entirely up to her to prove him right. Empowered by Mr. Thompson's unwavering trust, Sarah wasted no time. The relief she felt was quickly overshadowed by the immense weight of expectation and the daunting task ahead. She immediately set about rallying a small, carefully selected team, not the loudest or most experienced, but those who had shown even a glimmer of openness to her ideas, those who appeared genuinely interested in solving the problem rather than protecting their own turf. There was a young software engineer named Mark, whose quiet brilliance often went unnoticed in the noisy corporate environment. An unassuming data analyst, Emily, who possessed an uncanny ability to distill complex figures into clear insights, and a customer service veteran, David, who understood the ground-level frustrations that Sarah's solution aimed to alleviate. This small band of open-minded individuals became her core, her champions in the labyrinthine corporate structure. They worked tirelessly, often late into the night, fueled by strong coffee and an unshakable belief in their mission. Implementing her unconventional strategy wasn't without its challenges. They encountered technical glitches that seemed intent on sabotaging their progress. Subtle acts of sabotage from disgruntled colleagues who couldn't accept the shift in direction, and moments of exhaustion when doubt threatened to creep in. There were days when Sarah felt the solitude of her position, the immense pressure of Mr. Thompson's confidence resting heavily on her shoulders. But each setback was met with renewed determination. Sarah, drawing on the resilience forged in her personal struggles, inspired her team to push through. She led by example, debugging code alongside Mark, poring over data with Emily, and brainstorming user interface improvements with David, always keeping the end-user experience firmly in mind. Her practical approach, honed by years of making do with less, allowed her to find innovative workarounds where others would have given up. Slowly, painstakingly, her plan began to yield unexpected positive results. The middleware layer, once a concept on a whiteboard, started taking shape, connecting the previously disparate systems with surprising efficiency. Customer service representatives, who had been struggling with the old, clunky CRM, found the new interface intuitive and responsive. The AI's output, now neatly translated into actionable insights, reduced call times and increased customer satisfaction scores, measurable metrics that began to turn heads. The project, which had been floundering for months, began to show tangible progress, proving the effectiveness of her unique perspective. The initial problems, once seemingly insurmountable, were systematically overcome, each small victory reinforcing their collective belief. During one particularly grueling late-night session, while reviewing some ancient project documentation, Sarah stumbled upon an old, faded photograph tacked to the corkboard in Mr. Thompson's otherwise immaculate office. It depicted a much younger, slightly less groomed Mr. Thompson, standing proudly beside a beat-up Ford pickup truck, wearing what looked suspiciously like a uniform from a manufacturing plant. Beneath it, a yellowed newspaper clipping detailed the struggles of a young entrepreneur who had started a small tech repair shop in a garage, eventually growing it into a successful regional business. It was a revelation. This wasn't just a wealthy CEO making a gamble. This was a man who remembered his own humble beginnings, who understood the grit and ingenuity required to build something from nothing. His decision to choose her wasn't random or eccentric. It was deeply rooted in empathy, in a recognition of a shared journey, and a profound understanding of what true potential looked like, far removed from polished resumes and tailored suits. She suddenly understood the quiet authority in his eyes, the unwavering conviction when he intervened on her behalf. He wasn't just a boss. He was a kindred spirit, a mentor who saw beyond superficialities. As the project continued to demonstrate undeniable success, the shift in her colleagues' perception became palpable. The initial skepticism from those who had dismissed her as an inexperienced outsider began to morph. Grudging respect slowly replaced disdain. They saw her long hours, her deep understanding of the technical details, and her unwavering commitment. Whispers of youthful idealism turned into acknowledgments of fresh perspective. The snide remarks about lack of practical experience were replaced by observations of her innate leadership. Engineers who had scoffed at her ideas now approached her for input. Project managers who had tried to sideline her now sought her counsel. Genuine admiration for her capabilities and her quiet, effective leadership began to take root. The success of the project was undeniable, and it was primarily attributed to Sarah's vision and relentless drive. With the project now firmly back on track and exceeding expectations, Mr. Thompson set a new, tighter deadline for its final implementation and launch. This wasn't a punishment, but a strategic move to capitalize on their momentum and demonstrate decisive action to the board. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of exhilaration and intense focus. Sarah, no longer just a trial employee, but having proven herself as an indispensable leader, stood at the helm, coordinating every aspect, motivating her expanded team, and working tirelessly towards the finish line. The duct-taped shoes, though still a part of her, now felt less like a marker of her past struggles and more like a badge of honor, a testament to the journey that had brought her to this pivotal moment. The final sprint was on. The energy in the room was electric, a palpable tension woven with anticipation. All eyes were fixed on the sprawling projection screen where the final success metrics of the customer service AI integration project pulsed in vibrant greens and blues. Sarah stood at the podium, her voice clear and confident, detailing the implementation phases, the challenges overcome, and ultimately, the unprecedented triumphs. She outlined how her middleware layer had not only streamlined operations, but had also improved customer satisfaction scores by an astounding 20% in just 3 months, far surpassing even the most optimistic initial projections. The team, once skeptical, now beamed with pride from their seats, their contributions meticulously acknowledged by Sarah. Mr. Thompson sat in the front row, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips, his gaze unwavering as he watched his protégé command the room. When the presentation concluded, a stunned silence hung in the air for a moment before erupting into spontaneous applause. Board members, typically reserved and critical, rose to their feet. Mr. Henderson, the sternest of the lot, approached Sarah, his handshake firm. "Ms. Hayes," he began, his voice thick with admiration, "you have not only salvaged this project, but have set a new benchmark for innovation within this company. My sincere apologies for any initial skepticism." Others echoed his sentiments, their faces alight with a newfound respect. The success was undeniable, a tangible testament to Sarah's vision and perseverance. Later that afternoon, Sarah was called into Mr. Thompson's spacious office, the same office where her journey had so unexpectedly begun. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He stood by his large mahogany desk, a formal letter in his hand. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, "you have not only proven your capabilities, but you have reminded us all of the invaluable lesson that true talent often lies hidden beneath assumptions and preconceived notions. You have earned this, every single bit of it." He extended the letter to her. Her name, Sarah Hayes, was printed elegantly at the top. It was the formal offer for the junior executive position, far exceeding her expectations in both salary and benefits, complete with stock options and a comprehensive relocation package for her family. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the crisp black ink on the page. The weight of worry she had carried for so long, the constant gnawing anxiety about her mother's medical bills, her siblings' education, their precarious future. It all began to lift, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief and triumph. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing past the shoes, past everything." He merely nodded, his eyes twinkling. "I saw what I needed to see, Sarah. Gumption, grit, and a mind that refuses to be confined." She accepted the offer with a heartfelt gratitude that resonated deeply within the quiet room. The world had shifted on its axis, Picking up her phone, her hands trembling slightly, she dialed her mother's number. "Mom," she choked out, a joyous sob escaping her lips. "I got it. I got the job. Everything's going to be okay." On the other end, her mother's voice, initially confused, dissolved into joyful tears. The celebration, she knew, would be legendary. Sarah never needed to wear her duct-taped shoes again for practicality, but she kept them. Tucked away carefully in a memory box, they became a cherished reminder of her journey, a tangible symbol of her resilience, her unwavering spirit, and the extraordinary belief of a millionaire CEO who dared to look beyond the surface. They were a testament to the fact that worth isn't measured by outward appearances, but by the fire within. Confident and poised, Sarah walked into her new future, ready to face the next challenges, knowing that her path was forged not just through her talent, but through the courage to remain true to herself, even when her circumstances dictated otherwise. Her story became a whisper, then a legend within the company, a beacon demonstrating that empathy and unconventional thinking in leadership could indeed unearth the most extraordinary potential. It served as a powerful, enduring lesson that sometimes the most magnificent diamonds are found not in polished display cases, but in the rough, unassuming corners of the world, waiting for someone with true vision to recognize their inherent brilliance. What do you think of Mr. Thompson's decision? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and click on the end screen to watch our next captivating tale.